Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday. We are here for another week of our Sunday devotionals that we have been doing since churches were closed for quarantine. So we're here again. And this is another week where we're talking about our favorite scripture stories. And I'm really excited about it. And I'm Rachel Wagner, and Chris is here.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me back again. This is such a blast. I look forward to it every week.
Yeah, now we're at the end of June. Can you believe it?
Oh my gosh, the end of June. Who would have thunk all the way back in March,
Oh,
right?
it's crazy. But I got to go to the drive-in movie theater this week with my niece, so that was really fun. We saw
Nice.
the third How to Train Your Dragon movie.
That is a good one.
Yeah, it was a good
I'm
one. It was
I'm
even better than, I don't know if it's just because of scarcity. I liked it. I mean, I liked it originally, but I was like, wow, this was really, really good. I hadn't seen it since I initially saw it at screening, and so that was really cool.
I think I've seen it twice, but it is a really good one. Definitely
Yeah.
better than the second one, but
Yeah.
the first one is still my favorite.
Agreed. Yeah, we're on the same page there. So we each have picked out a story from the Old Testament and a story from the New Testament, and that we're going to talk about. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on these stories and your insight. So if you're listening, please leave us your thoughts, and that would be great. And so I'll start. My Old Testament story is a really simple one, but one I really like. Samuel the prophet, he was called to anoint a king amongst the people of Jerusalem. And he didn't even want to have a king originally. He was against it, but he agreed. And so Saul was the first king, and things didn't go well in the end with Saul. And so it was time to anoint a new king. And went to Bethlehem, and he saw the people, and he felt particularly called to the house where David lived, his father's house, and his all of these sons, and the sons are large in stature and strong, and David is the kind of the scrawny runt of the of the family, and he's out. They don't even think of him as a possibility. He's out with the sheep, and Samuel is looking at all of these sons, and he looks at one, and he says, "No, pass." And he looks at another, and he says, "Pass." And he says to there's 7 sons, and he says to Jesse, he says, "Are these all of your children?" There's sensing something's missing, and he says, "Oh well, there's this youngest one that he's with the sheep." And so Samuel says, "Go get the younger one." And that's when God says to him, "Look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I've refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart." And so the Lord saw the goodness of David, and the humble nature of David, and he called him to be the king, despite his outward appearance. And I think that that's very moving, and it's a reminder of the way that our Heavenly Father looks at us, that he doesn't see the things that are so distracting and frustrating sometimes with the world, as that will be so harsh and judge us for not being perfect in our outward appearance, or maybe the way we talk, or the way that we whatever it might be, that the Lord knows our hearts, and he looketh at that. And so I've always really liked that story. And so then David gets anointed, and he becomes the king. And what do you think about that story?
I love that story. I mean, that always spoke, like when I was in high school, it always spoke to me because I was that little skinny wimpy kid
Yeah.
who got picked on quite a bit. And so here is a great big win for the little skinny wimpy kid. He was so
Right.
skinny and wimpy, they're like, "You're out there with the sheep, and these other sons of mine, they're my pride and joy." And here's God saying, "No, I don't look on the outward, I'm looking on the inward. David is a man after my own heart." And so that story always spoke to me because it is about the heart. You know, it's kind of like the Green Lantern. It's not about how physically strong he is and looking as powerful as all the other superheroes. It's the fact that he has strong will. And so he can use the power of the ring because of his will. David had strong faith. And that's what God was looking at in his heart, that David was somebody who truly pursued God. And I love that.
Yeah. And who do you want as a king? You want somebody who's humble, who is just fit to be with the sheep and to have a sort of a simple life. That's who you want as a
Yep.
king, as a leader, is somebody that doesn't necessarily really want to be king. I think that that's the ideal. And so he saw that humility and he understood David's heart. I think that's the most important thing, is that it can feel like we aren't understood sometimes by the world, and to know that God knows our hearts and he knows what we're trying, even if we don't necessarily articulate it the best, or aren't the most even if we aren't perfect, he knows our heart. And I think that's comforting.
And I love that because I mean, how do we know David today? We know him as the man after God's heart. Yet that dude had a pretty big scandal in his life, where he slept with one of his soldiers' wives, sent that dude out to be killed to try to hide his crime. But then when God convicts him of it, he doesn't continue to try to hide it or be prideful. He confesses and he repents. And what I love here's this horrible scandal written in the Bible for all of us today to read and see. But even after that horrible scandal, what's written in the Bible for us to see is David was a man after God's heart. And that just shows us God's absolute unconditional forgiveness. Like you said, we're not perfect, but he looks at the heart. So when we make mistakes, we just need to come to God and be honest. And then he will lead us in that path that we should go. And I love that comfort that still to this day, David is known as a man after God's heart.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. They say power corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And, if they wanted a king so bad, and every single one of their kings ended kind of badly.
Pretty much.
Solomon, it didn't end well. David didn't end well. Saul didn't end well. So it's interesting to me. But what was your Old Testament story?
Well, my Old Testament story, I ended up going with Joshua and Caleb being sent out as spies in the land of Canaan. And I went with that story because, like your story, it speaks to me as that little skinny kid and how God looks in the heart. But the story of Joshua and Caleb speaks to me as somebody who's dealt with anxiety for a huge chunk of my life. Because when you look at the story of Joshua and Caleb, they've been set free from Egypt, the Israelites. They've spent a good amount of time now wandering through the wilderness, and God has given them the 10 Commandments. He's spoken to them. Now they are brought to the promised land, and the time has come to take it. So 12 spies are sent into the land, to give a report. And of the 12, 10 give a really bad report. The bad report being there's giants in the land. Like they were surprised that this land was occupied, and not just occupied. It actually says here that the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We saw the Nephilim there. These are the giants, like the giant Philistine Goliath that David faced. Imagine many more of those. And so here is a land filled with giants. And what's amazing is how a negative report seems so much easier to latch onto and spread so much faster than the positive report. Because here's Caleb saying this. He says, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. And what I love about Christianity is it's not a blind faith. We don't sit there and ignore our problems or ignore the giants. We acknowledge their existence. The Bible is acknowledging the existence of the giants, but it's saying God is slightly bigger than the giants. And if God has said, this is your promised land, well, then he's going to make a way for you to take that promised land. So be bold and take that land. And that's exactly what Caleb is saying. But the negative report spreads faster. And this is what's interesting. As the 10 are talking about their negative report, they're saying, we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. And to me, that's just anxiety right there. It wasn't just that the giants looked really big. In their own eyes, they seemed really small. And to me, that is probably the most powerful statement in this story. And so because the nation grabbed a hold of that unbelief, they grabbed a hold of the report of the 10, and they murmured against Moses. In fact, they almost elected a new leader to take them back to slavery into Egypt. And that's how bad this negative report spread. They let fear control them. So finally, after Moses interceded, God said, okay, but none of these people are going to inherit the land. So what's going to happen is you're going to go in the wilderness now for 40 years. And so this generation will die off, and their children will inherit the land. And that's the way this is going to go, except for Joshua and Caleb, who have a different spirit. They will get to inherit this land. And then the people were like, wait, never mind. We'll take it now. We'll take it now. And God's like, no, I told you what to do. You need to go back to the wilderness, and in 40 years you could take it. But they ignored that even and went to try to take on the giants. And it even says they left the ark and the presence. So the presence of God did not move, and they didn't take the ark. And so they go off to try to take on the giants all by their wee little selves. And so it's amazing how that defiance kind of hit both ways. And so what speaks to me about that is somebody who deals with anxiety. It's easy, so much easier to grab a hold of the fears. It's so much easier to grab a hold of the doubts. It's so much easier to see myself as small and the giants as big. What we need to do is what Joshua and Caleb did. They're not ignoring those giants. They're acknowledging their existence, but they're saying, God is so much bigger. And so this is like something I've been in the process in for the last couple of years, is learning not to ignore those things that worry me, but to know that God is so much bigger and his promises are so much greater. So I need to look at how much bigger God is versus these worries and know that I'm going to inherit his promise.
Yeah, this is really interesting because I have to admit, this is not a story I'm super familiar with in the Old Testament. Old Testament's it's a big book, so there's a lot in there. And I have to admit, so it was really interesting that you picked this one. And with anxiety, it's kind of like, they say that that if someone tells you don't think about a purple elephant, what do you immediately think of as a purple elephant?
I see,
and that's the way. Right now. Yeah, that's right. That's the way that anxiety is. Like once you start thinking about that purple elephant that you're afraid of, that thing that is there, then the more you try to not think about it, the more it's there. And so the anxiety just grows and grows and grows. And so what really the best way about it is to acknowledge it and then figure out what you're going to do about it.
Yep.
And I found the most, I love, there's a book called Feeling Good by David Burns. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
But I love it. It's really helped me a lot. I wish I had it around. I was just checking to see if I happened to, but yeah, it's a really great book. It's been around since the 80s. I think it's really old, but it's great. And it's cognitive therapy. And he talks about creating basically like a plan for helping you with your distorted thoughts. So like, for instance, as just an example, if you let's say you burn the dinner and your immediate thought is, I'm the worst cook in the world. Nobody will ever like anything I cook. That's a distorted thought. You don't know everybody in the world. You haven't eaten everything for everybody in the world. You're not likely and that's not, I'm sure people will eat some of your food. You've just cooked this one meal badly. And so that's what he gets you to do, is to really like write down and create a plan about how, like, okay, this is this distorted thought. This is how I'm going to start thinking about it. This is the reality. This is what I'm going to do moving forward. And there's lots of different examples and different kinds of distortions. And it helped me so much after I had a panic attack, when I was in a really unhappy place in my life, and just being able to kind of take control of the situation and be able to create a plan for, okay, feeling that coming on, feeling, okay, what am I going to do? Here's the things. And he thinks, if medicine's part of that plan, that's perfectly fine. Everybody is different, but you have a plan and you aren't just kind of pretending it's going to go away. Because as you said, that's not effective. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it becomes very destructive. And so yeah, if I have actually a video on my channel about feeling good, and the book and the workbook is very good as well. And when I went to a therapist, this was during that really hard time. He said, because I was just getting super into this book, and he's like, yeah, that's the gold standard. So I highly recommend it. It's really good.
Yeah.
And yeah, just getting ways to kind of, how am I gonna conquer this purple elephant?
Yep. Yep. And I love what you said about distorted thoughts, because I mean, they have those distorted thoughts. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that is quite, I mean, it says they were Nephilim. So it says they were the giants. So I don't think that part was distorted, but they really looked at themselves in such a negative light. And it's like, you can't do that. You're created in the image of God, and you're loved dearly by God.
Yeah.
And God promised them this land. God is with you. So trust him and be strong in him. And I think that's like what you said. That was Joshua and Caleb's plan, was to try to get them to grab a hold of that vision that God is so much bigger than this.
Yeah.
And in the darkest night, he's already there. So be strong. But they wanted to go
it's
back.
interesting because it's almost the flip side of the anointing David story.
Yeah.
Where Samuel helped God, where God helped Samuel to see the value of David.
Yep.
And here you have these it's almost as if David had then flipped around and been said, well, I don't see any value in myself.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that God sees us as kings and queens, and he looketh on the heart. And we sometimes don't even see ourselves as those kings and queens.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got to learn to try to see those things through God's perspective. And that takes work, and that takes practice. And we have to be okay with the fact that, yeah, we're beating old habits in our brain. So it's going to take some work, and it's going to take some practice. But that's the great thing about God, is he's patient. He will continue to hold our hands and walk with us through that. Okay.
So I have this. It just made me think of what you're saying. I don't know if you can really see it very good, but
yeah,
I have this in my bathroom. It's every morning, and it's Proverbs 31, and it says, I am the daughter of a king who is not moved by the world, for my God is with me and goes before me. I do not fear, because I am his.
Oh, that's awesome. That is a great thing to look at every morning. That's awesome.
So if I'm brushing my teeth or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. You start the day with the perfect reminder that you are his. That's awesome.
Yeah. So just made me think of it, what you're saying. But yeah, that so many things in this world are about tearing us down and us helping us to feel badly. Is how it's they get us to purchase. A lot of it is monetary. They get us to purchase things. We when we're sad, when we're down, we purchase more, we buy more. And so that's part of the reason why they do that. And we just have to remember how God looks at us. And so my New Testament story is in John chapter 9. And you have a man who Jesus passed by this man. He's been blind his whole life. And people said, well, who sinned? Did this man's parents sin? Why is he blind? And it says, his disciples asked, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus said, neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. And so then he gathers together some clay, and he spits on the ground, and he says, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And when he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground, made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said, go wash in the pool of Siloam. He went his way, therefore, and washed, and came seeing. And so everybody's astonished and amazed. And I like this story a lot because the whole idea of judgment, I think, is in this
Yes.
story. People judged him, people judged his parents, because he was blind, that he was somehow at fault, that his parents were somehow at fault. But Jesus did not judge. Jesus said, in fact, this thing that people are judging you for is a blessing that you've been given to show the power of God. And so that will show the works of God within you this day. And so then he and I kind of wonder if the whole clay and spitting and everything was all just kind of more for show, because obviously he has other miracles where he just lays his hands on their
Yeah.
heads, or
Or
not even
speak the
anything.
word.
Yeah, it just speaks the
Yeah.
word. But I think that it kind of makes people I don't know, it kind of makes people uh, feel like this is somehow sort of more of a power, I don't know, than if it's just sort of that he's actually like tangibly doing something. I think it maybe makes people see it a little bit in a different way, especially when they were looking at this as this man's fault or his
Yeah.
parents' fault. And I just think of how quick we are to judge, especially in our modern society, where we're canceling things and not right and left, and judging people harshly, when we need to, like, get the beam out of our own eyes.
Yes.
Or we're taking out
Yes.
the moat. And so I that's what I like about this story. And this man ends up getting this miracle, so that he could show the works of God, and that Jesus is the light of the world.
Yeah.
So that's what I like about that.
I love that story. It's actually one of my favorite stories in the Bible. And this lady was a guest speaker at our church. Her name is Mia, and she gave a perspective on this story that I had just never had before. And it's the judgment angle that you were talking about, because it's true. You read that everybody thought this man sinned, that he was born blind. But if he was born blind, how could he have sinned? So, his parents sinned. Either way, he's worthless to this society because of somebody's sin. And this blindness is a punishment from God. So no matter what, that's why this dude is homeless. He's looked at as trash. He's canceled, and he's just sitting on the side of the road, right? And as he's sitting here on the side of the road, Jesus says, they're like, oh, who sinned that he was born blind? Jesus, thinking they were smart and analytical. And Jesus says, that's not it. There's no such cause and effect here. But then he says this was done that the glory of God might be shown. That was probably the most purpose, the most love that was ever spoken into that man's life.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine? I mean, even without the miracle of his eyes being opened, the well of emotion that would be opened when somebody, instead of calling him trash, spoke over him, you are going to show the glory of God. And now look at this, 2,000 years later, his story is in the Bible, and we still get to read it, and God's glory is still shown through this miracle. So here was society writing him off. And I think we do this as Christians. And, I grew up very charismatic, grew up very much in the Pentecostal camp. And whether Pentecostals want to admit this or not, a lot of times they really do try to find a cause and effect in the whole religious circles. Oh, so this must have happened because of a lack of faith. This must have happened because you sinned. And the truth is, sometimes we try to find a cause and effect where there is no cause and effect. Instead, what we should be doing is, what is God going to do now? And that's what we should be seeking, the revelation of what is God going to do now? Because in trying to find cause and effect, we end up doing the blame game. And here, this guy was blamed and was told it's because of some great sin you're punished. And here's Jesus saying, no, the glory of God is going to shine through you, my friend. I mean, can you imagine those uplifting words?
Yeah. And not only, like you said, not only is he going to have the works of God manifest in his life, but his whole being blind was to show the miracles of God. Mm-hmm. And how often we look at things that are difficult in our lives, struggles, and we just think, why did we have to face this? Why did this have to happen? And if we could just see that broader perspective, can you think of all those years that we assume this is an older man with some experience, and you think of all those years where he must have felt frustrated, and yet here, if he'd had that bigger perspective that God has, to see the works of God are to be manifest, I think, and he was literally one of the most important people to ever be born to
Yeah.
show this incredible miracle. And
And
so it helps you in those tough times
it
when you're
does.
just frustrated, and why did this have to happen? Why did I have to have this problem? And your greatest struggle might actually be your greatest blessing.
Yep. And
in
one of the things,
reality.
one of my favorite things Jesus ever said is he said, in the world, you will have trouble. And it's weird because I think sometimes when people preach that verse, they say there's Jesus promising we're going to have trouble. I'm like, no, he's not promising we're going to have trouble. He's being honest. We're born into a fallen world, and in this world, we're going to have
I
tribulation.
mean, look at all the trouble he had.
Yeah, he was crucified for being a good guy.
Right.
He was sinless. He didn't do anything wrong, and they killed him for it. And Jesus said this, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And so it's about that broader perspective. Yeah, we go through stuff, but man, God is bigger than that. He has seen the end from the beginning. And the awesome thing, I had this picture pop in my mind a while back. You know, if we go through this world with our hearts made of straw, we're in the world and the world's on fire. If our heart is dry straw and it catches fire, it's going to be consumed and burn up. But Jesus gives us a new heart. He transforms us. He gives us hearts of gold. And when gold goes through the same fire, it's not consumed or destroyed, but it's purified and refined. And so in both instances, he's not pulling us out of the world. But when he gives us that new heart, suddenly the fire has a different end result, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so as we look to that broader picture, we know that he will bring us through into victory and mold us into something greater than we could have imagined.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what's your final New Testament story?
Well, my final New Testament story is the miracle of the fish, when Simon Peter has been fishing all night and he's caught nothing.
For
And
weeks. For weeks, he's got nothing.
And it's like, I feel like whenever I read the Gospels, I want to be John. That's who I want to be, because it says this is the disciple Jesus loved. He was always the closest one to Jesus. So in terms of that, I always desperately want to be John, but I'm Peter. The dude had, you know, he put his foot in his mouth all the time. He cut off a dude's ear with a sword, you know. He's sitting here telling Jesus, you're not going to die, Jesus, to the point that Jesus had to turn around and be like, get behind me, Satan. And I'm like, crap. That's so me sometimes. I put my foot in my mouth. I speak out of turn. No matter how much I read the Gospels, I want to be John, but I think I'm Peter. And here's another place where I'm Peter. Because Jesus sees Peter's boat, and he says, like, you know, can I use your boat? And my dad gave me an example of this one time when we were standing by a pond. He went to the other side of the pond, and when he projected his voice over the water carried his voice better, like a natural amplifier. So Jesus getting in the boat with Peter and going off a little bit, it's kind of like a natural amplifier, so everybody could hear him a little bit better. Jesus does his teaching, and after Peter's been fishing all night, Jesus says this, put out into deep water and let down your nets for a catch. Simon answered, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. So I'm done and I'm going home. No, he didn't conclude it that way, but that's probably the way I would have wanted to conclude it, because I would have been so tired. And to me, this also goes back to, we are grasshoppers in our own eyes and their eyes as well. If I spent all that time and didn't catch anything, I'd be thinking I'm the worst fisherman in the world. Me personally, this is how I internalize things. I would be punishing myself for not being able to catch those fish. Then Peter says this, though, but because you say so, I will let down the nets. So that's different than the children of Israel back in the day right there, because in faith, he's like, fine, you said it, I'm exhausted, but you know what? I'll do it. When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. And when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man. But what is so amazing about this story is Jesus gives him a new vision here about being more than just a fisherman. He says, don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people. Like he said, I will make you a fisher of men. All because here's Peter exhausted and tired, and he probably didn't want to throw his net down for another catch. But Jesus said, throw your net down one more time. And he listened.
Yeah.
And I feel like this miracle was to show Peter a vision of what Jesus wanted Peter to be later in life. You know, he became the leader of the first church. And he wanted to show Peter, when you follow me and you obey me, you will catch the fish. And I relate to this story so much, especially the way The Chosen, the TV series, portrayed it. Like, I relate to it so much as a YouTuber, because I relate sometimes YouTubing to fishing. Like, when you're fishing, you could be told, if you fish at this time of day, at this part of the water, there'll be this many fish. If you have this right bait, you will be able to catch the fish. How many how-to YouTube channels are there telling you how to do a YouTube channel?
Right.
If you do your SEO just this way, and you talk about these topics, and you see these topics get traction for you, and you keep doing this and blah, blah, blah. If you hit all these right formulas, you will have 10,000 subscribers by the end of the month. And when that doesn't happen, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I must be horrible at this. I must be terrible. I must be the worst YouTuber out there. And that's where I relate to Peter, because it's fishing. In the end, you can only put down your net and hope you caught the fish. And then here's Jesus, and he says, cast your net one more time. And at Jesus's word, he did it. And once it happened, he gave Peter a new vision.
Yeah.
So this story convicts me, because it's like, it's too easy to punish myself and get down on myself. How about I stop doing that? How about I just let Jesus get in the boat? And what he tells me to do, whether I'm tired or not, I'll do it.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting? We did not consult or plan these stories, like our picks. We really didn't. And yet all four are all about Christ, God, seeing more potential in all of us than we see in ourselves.
Yep.
Whether it's David, and it has the potential to be a king despite his small stature. You know, whether it's the blind man who was looked at as a sinner for nothing, no fault of his own, and you know, that they can defeat the giants, Joshua and Caleb, and that's just a little blessing as in of itself.
It
It's
really
amazing
is.
to me, and so I don't know. That's very encouraging, because we are in challenging times where sometimes it can feel overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming and discouraging. I was actually just talking to somebody about that today, that I was just feeling a little bit discouraged, because I think that it's going to be I think more things are going to get delayed, and now with Disneyland getting delayed, and I'm not saying it's not the right thing, but it's just like, it's just hard. It's discouraging. And, but that to know that God sees us for more than even, and he can help us get through any situation is really pretty amazing.
Well, it's also like what we were just talking about with the blind man. We go through those difficult times, but there's a broader picture. Yeah. So when we look at this, and it's discouraging, it is discouraging, especially here in California, some of the resurgence that's happening here. And it's like, okay, our movie theater's going to open, and what's going to happen? You know, I mean, the little things, it's like, okay, what is going on here in the world? And it can get very discouraging. But then we got to remember to let Jesus in the boat. There is a broader picture here. And we know victory is around the corner. We don't know what that victory looks like, but what we do know is that what the devil uses to try to kill us, God is so much bigger and so much smarter. God will turn that right around, and it will grow us. And so we might not know, why is this happening and all of that stuff, but what we can do is look for the revelation of, what does God want to do through us now? Yeah. Because he sees the bigger picture, and he sees the potential in you. He sees the potential in me of what he wants to mold us into, even through these difficult times.
Yeah, it's really quite comforting. Yeah. It really is. So, well, thank you so much for doing this. This was really great. This was one of my favorites, I think.
Yes, mine too. I think God was really preaching to me the whole time. Really.
I know, me too.
Every word said from you and from me was God working in me.
Yes. Well, let us know if you're listening. Let us know your thoughts about these stories and the things we talked about. I would really be curious for people's feedback on this one. And where can people find you on your site and everything?
You can find me here on YouTube. My channel is called Durbania. So I'm the only channel with that name. So you type that in, you will find me pretty much right away. And I love to do this just on my channel all the time. I have this whole playlist called the Theological Analysis of, where I love to do what I call theological analyses or theological reviews of finding God in movies. I like to pick apart movies and find the symbolism. One of my favorite two that I just did is Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. Both of those were an awful lot of fun to put together because I love Indiana Jones. So love to have you come over and check that out.
Yes, please do. And next week, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We are going to be talking about the movie All Saints, since we're both film critics. And it's one of the best faith-based films that's been released in a while. And it has 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is definitely a rarity amongst faith-based films. And so if you want to watch it this week to get ready for us to talk about it, we'd love you to do that. I think it's pretty available streaming most places that you can rent it. So check it out. And and you can find me here at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media and iTunes, YouTube. So please check all of that out. I really appreciate it. And let us know your feedback. We really, really do appreciate it for the Sunday devotionals. It's been really key for me keeping my sanity these last 4 months. It's been 4 months. Can you believe it?
Oh my gosh.
So please subscribe. And thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk to y'all next week. Bye, everybody.